Hello and welcome to AM Prime here on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining me once more as we get straight into this morning's discussion. Now, everyone has an issue here in TNT. Everyone is affected by this spiraling crime race. And it seems as though we're preaching about this every single week, but not many solutions are actually being put forward. Well, one independent center actually has a plan that he is willing to share with all agencies of national security. And that independent center is Senior Counsel Anthony Vieira. He's actually my first guest this morning, and he's with us via the Zoom platform. Good morning, Senator, and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. You mentioned that's an all-encompassing national development strategy to deal with crime. Precisely what does this mean? In fact, how is it even different to crime plans that have been touted within the public in the past?
Yes, good question. All right, so let me start off. Yes, we had two recent statements, two crime plans. One was the declaration by the CARICOM heads following the recent symposium. And then I saw recently the Commissioner of Police put out a violent crime reduction plan. The thing is, though, that they're all identifying plans, but a plan is not a strategy. And I think what we really need is strategy. And big strategy. Strategy should be the starting point, not a line item. So, sorry.
No, I was then going to ask you, you're using this word strategy quite a bit. In fact, how is strategy and policy different? Is there any difference between strategy and policy?
Yeah. As I had indicated in my offering, there are different things: strategy, policy, and plan. So, strategy is. Well, let me put it this way. A plan is a line item. It's a tactic. It's something that you would implement. It's actionable. And we have lots of little plans. So, for example, we talk about reforming the education system, strengthening forensic capabilities, making communities safer. These are wishes as well as plans. But you need to tie it all together. You need to have a vision. You need to have a grand strategy. So if you were going to build a house, for example, you just don't start hammering away. You don't start just digging holes. You really do need to have an idea of what it is you want to accomplish, where the different rooms are going to be, how they're going to be located, what sort of size. And so coming back to the plan, a plan is really just a set of activities set out to do something. They don't need to be coherent. Plans can work in isolation. We like plans. Plans sound good. It looks as though you're accommodating something. But strategy and grand strategy is where you integrate all these different plans and chores that position you in a certain way to achieve a certain objective. And so it means that you have to you start with the end in mind, what it is you want to achieve. How is this going to occur? What is doable? And so strategy is something that is dynamic. You refine it, you tweak it as you go along. But plans are by their very nature limited. Strategy, I think, gives you the best outcome as opposed to just little plans.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of applying diverse law enforcement powers, I know you mentioned that strategies can work in isolation. But in terms of applying a diversity of law enforcement powers, are you referring to the fact that there needs to be an all-encompassing effort by all agencies of national security? Would that even include, for example, like what we're seeing in Tobago with the Defense Force working with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in terms of more foot patrols, in terms of more manpower? Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely. I think the state has a lot of resources at its disposal, and it's been going about using this and that, but almost sporadically in an ad hoc manner. What I'm calling for is a tying together all these resources in the form of an integrated strategy in a collaborative way and all functioning at optimum. So yes, you need to have your police working in tandem with a working judicial legal system, in tandem with education system, in tandem with social development, because it's all tied together. Somebody sent me a video the other day with a shooting out in a Morvan. Grabbing those guys, taking their guns, is just a dent. It doesn't work. Going and raiding hotspots and making a few arrests is a useful and necessary exercise, but by itself, it will not work. Our problems are deep-seated, they're deep-rooted, and they need to be dealt with in a holistic way. So yes, you get the impression, for example, like customs. Now, a lot of the arms are coming in, supposedly, through our legitimate ports in containers. But you get the feeling as though customs is working by itself, or the police go in there and they don't cooperate with customs. All these agencies need to be brought up to full speed. They need to be working in a collaborative way. Coast Guard, Air Guard, customs, police, soldiers.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you're mentioning thus far doesn't seem to be anything much new. I mean, this is something that has constant conversation is taking place regarding things that you are suggesting. Honestly, it's good, it's beneficial. I think many people will agree with what you're suggesting. I certainly agree with what you are suggesting because I myself have stated such before. But the thing is, the reception generally by those who have the authority and the power to actually implement and enact what you're saying has been cold. So what is it that we are now the ones who are the fools that are constantly repeating ourselves, that are constantly stressing on these points without the reception that is needed for effective change?
Yeah, you're right. One of the reasons I put this out there is because, everybody is saying the same things. Everybody realizes how serious this crime situation is and we need to address it. But I'm hoping that we can inspire the leadership, the leaders in our society to really put aside differences and come together, right? We all know what needs to be done. You're absolutely right. But it's to find that will. And I really believe that for this to work, we need to get a grassroots support. I read somewhere about making change happen. And they said, if you look at it from a pyramid, the pyramid is like this. And the traditional model is that the leader is at top and the leader brings the base along. But for change to happen, you have to invert the pyramid. The leaders come from behind, but it is led from the top. So I am hoping that through this offering, our leaders will understand the importance of the need for collaboration, for strategy, to work with leaders across the whole of society. Our political leaders have to work with community leaders, they have to work with the chambers of commerce, they have to work with the media. We need to really start moving this forward, because if you think crime is bad now, my sense is it's going to get a lot worse. Mm-hmm. And so we have to really put pressure on our leaders to do what they need to do.
I'm going to come back to that point. It's an excellent and pertinent point. I'll come to that in a moment, but I just want to go back to this strategy that you mentioned earlier. The objective, the end goal, is it crime reduction? Is that the sole objective, crime reduction, or does it go beyond just reducing the numbers that are reported on a daily basis?
Good question. Well, as you would have seen in my offering, crime, to really address crime, you got to go beyond crime. So my suggestion is that we need to treat crime as a catalyst, right? We need to treat crime as a way to force us to realize the inequalities, the injustices, and the suffering that is going on in our society. We need to use crime as a catalyst to help us design a better future, to build better communities, to produce self-reliant, productive, better citizens, you know, the UN Sustainable Project about no one being left behind. Let's really activate that. And government's role really is to lead, it's to empower, it's to inspire, it's to coordinate, to facilitate. So I get a little disheartened when I hear language as though it's not our responsibility or it's somebody else to do it, can't pass the buck. No, we have to really recognize that this is also an opportunity, but we have to handle it in a certain way, and it's not just arresting bad guys. Yeah.
Now, let's go back to what we're speaking about in regards to leaders. I think we focus a lot on law enforcement agencies, but what has been within the public domain, at least in the opinion of mine and many who I've spoken to, is that it seems as though it's politicians working with law enforcement, not law enforcement working with politicians. And there is a difference between that, between politicians working with law enforcement versus law enforcement working with politicians. Is it that there's a need, a desire for the latter to now happen, where law enforcement agencies work with politicians, whether it be for policy, whether it be for legislation, rather than the directives or the inspiration, as you just said, the confidence coming from those in authority from a political office?
Right. Well, I get a little wary when I hear the language of politicians working with law enforcement. I'm not talking, it shouldn't really be politicians or any political cap. We're really talking about government. And so the starting point for me is we could have the best police operating at optimum. The situation we have in Trinidad right now, the police cannot solve crime on their own. So government, and here I'm talking now the relevant line agencies, the Minister of National Security, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, government has the ultimate responsibility to be the architect of a holistic crime fighting strategy. And that means not just addressing the crime hotspots and engaging in protection with the policing and working in collaboration with the police, but we're talking about long-term social involvement. Crime support operations are temporary, but we have to balance what's going on in our communities, what's going on in our education system, what's going on in the world of work. And so, yes, everybody has to work together, but someone has to lead. And this is a critical, what I would say is a missing ingredient. If you're going to lead, you must have a vision. You must have a plan. Where are we going to with this? We're not just raiding hotspots and arresting bad guys. How are we taking this forward? And that is what I'm hoping we can get the public to think about, to talk about. It's really to engage in critical thinking and for people to start coming together. This is an opportunity to transform Trinidad and Tobago if properly handled.
You know, Senator Anthony Vieira, leaders here in Trinidad and Tobago exist because everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody wants to lead. But leadership does not necessarily exist. Not everybody has leadership skills and qualities and characteristics, yet everybody wants to lead. If that is the case, then aren't we a bit doomed? Because to a certain extent, we're now focusing on the public's, their participation, their involvement, as you said, from a grassroots level. But there's another issue with that, and that is the education within the public as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the fact is we have leaders, but they need to, I think, change gears and really lead. And you lead by having a vision, selling that vision, and empowering people. You lead from behind. But it's not just enough to have leadership. Huh? One of the points that I keep continuously making is that we are operating with systems and institutions that are not functioning at optimum. So in this leadership we need to upgrade all our systems and processes. We need to really engage in serious institutional reform, because if you have all the ideas and you're trying to make your objectives happen, but you're trapped in an existing framework that is undoing or stymieing your efforts, you're going nowhere fast. We have a lot of outdated and archaic regulations, inefficient service commissions. We are operating, again, you talk about it, we're operating in silos. We need to look at the thing as a system, an integrated network. So I think the leadership point is where institutions and systems are inefficient, they need to be strengthened. And part of it is our colonial heritage. There's a word called isomorphic. And what that talks about is that we've copied all the forms of the developed countries, but we are unable to reproduce the outcomes that you want, because we just copied the forms without understanding the substance. And so we really do need to examine ourselves, our culture, who we are as a people, what we want to take forward, And I keep saying that the purpose of government is not to follow procedures, it's to provide services to citizens. So you have to start back with the end in mind, what it is you want to do, how are we going to achieve it, and then you work your systems and processes toward that end.
So I hear you very well and clear in regards to reforms are necessary for the institutions that currently exist. But who are the ones that should be charged or responsible with planting a new education model? Are we leaving that solely up to government?
Well, this is where I think we have an elections coming up. I think all the people who hope to go up for office and to get citizens' votes, they need to now come up with serious plans and leadership and sincere offerings as to how they're going to address crime, how they're going to deal with the inequalities in our system, the cost of living issue, which has gone up. And so they have to now be responsive, because I think those are the two big issues for citizens, crime and the cost of living. And if our leaders are unable to address that, I think they will be disconnected with the population.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Senator, your expectations versus reality. Is it that there is an expectation that some of what you have recommended, some of things that you have outlined, will actually be considered and adopted? Because the reality is, I can say, listen, I'm going to consider what you're suggesting, but it goes in one ear and comes out the other. What is your expectations, let's say, compared to the past versus the reality of the situation?
Yeah, it's true. As the Chinese say, talk, don't cook rice. We do. Okay, so let's step back. We do have a statement from the police on how they plan to reduce violent crime. We do have a declaration from the heads of government stating what their intentions are and what they hope to achieve. So we have to now hold them to that, but we need to get them to take it beyond just crime. We need to get them to understand that this, and so what I'm talking about is, my hope is that civil society, we heard Brian Lara talking about his experience, we hear religious leaders talking about the need to come together. This is serious, and I think there is an avalanche of a population crying out for support, crying out for help. This pressure needs to be maintained on our leaders. We need to hear from them to come up and do something concrete. It can't be just left to the same old, as you say, just another talk shop. No, this has to be a catalyst.
Mm-hmm. Independent Senator Anthony Vieira, Senior Counsel, thank you very much for joining me this morning. A very intriguing conversation, a discussion indeed, which I hope goes beyond just the 30 minutes that we've had this discussion this morning. For now, we're going to have to pause due to time, but thank you very much for donating your time to share with us what you see as necessary, especially as it relates to a national development strategy. Thank you very much, sir, and all the best to you. Keep well.
Thank you. My pleasure. All the best. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a quick break here on AM Prime. When we return, well, we'll get into some more discussions this morning with an individual who considers himself a patriot. He referred to himself as Mr. Blanchishes, Mr. Cascade, Mr. Port of Spain, Mr. St. Anne's, Mr. TND. We'll be right back after this.
The MG Showroom has an SUV for your personality with multiple features that will have you driving in comfort and style. MG gives you the most miles, and now you can own your brand new MG for as little as $85 a day. I am Trisha Burke from Massey Motors. Contact me to drive away with your MG today.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Welcome back to AM Prime. As you are aware, AM Prime and WESN Content Capital are very much pleased to partner with the organizers of North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival 2023. It has been our privilege to actually interview very many of the artists who will be gracing the stage in 1 week's time, actually. Yes, because next week, Friday, it starts with movie night, following the Jazz Festival on the Saturday and brunch from the Community Council on the Sunday. Now, I'm joined this morning by one of the event organizers. As I've mentioned previously, he refers to himself as Mr. Blanchisseuse, Mr. Cascade, Mr. Everywhere, Mr. Portis Main, Mr. Trinidad and Tobago. I'm joined, and I refer to him simply as Chairman, Mr. Louis Leasing is with us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Keaton, and good morning to our listeners, wherever they may be this morning.
Well, Mr. Leasing, start this conversation by simply asking you, I don't think many people would say, I'm going to actually construct a jazz and heritage festival, and I'm going to place it in Blanchisseuse. What was the thinking behind that as the process to establishing this festival, which is in its second year since the COVID-19 pandemic? It's going on before that, obviously, but this is the second year following the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, Keaton, it's about building communities. It's about building a destination called Blanchisseuse, because Blanchisseuse is a place with all the attributes for a good tourist destination, both domestic and international. More than that, Blanchisseuse is a community that is in need, and so the festival is a catalyst for the establishment of a bed and breakfast industry. If you know Blanchisseuse at all, you'd know it's a place of approximately 15 to 1,700 inhabitants. Most of the people own their own homes. Most are Afro-Trinidadians. It's a place with one little hotel that recently changed hands, couple guest houses, and about 7 or so shops, program shops. This does not lend itself for long-term sustainability. And so, looking at Blanchisseuse, we thought that if we were able to do a good, as it were, entertainment product, we would be able to begin to draw people to Blanchisseuse, and the people would be able to, the community would, as it were, respond in like manner and establish themselves into providers of bed and breakfast services. Working with the Blanchisseuse Community Council, we were able to realize that in year one, and we were able to get about 21 people to come on board to provide bed and breakfast services. Last year, across the North Coast, we were able to secure 107 rooms, which meant that it was astronomical growth over a period of five seasons of the Jazz. Mm-hmm. 4 seasons of the Jazz. This is its 5th year. And so, if you ask me why the Jazz, the bed and breakfast, as it were, came as a priority to the establishment of the bed and breakfast industry.
And how has the bed and breakfast industry, evolved since the establishment of North Coast Jazz Festival? Is it that the community of Blanchisseuse has now made this their own?
Well, let me say this to you. There's still scope for growth in the context of Blanchisseuse and the bed and breakfast program. At one point, we wrote to the government asking them to establish a soft loan window of $49 million, whereby we calculated that would provide just about 200 good rooms, well-appointed, properly furnished, air-conditioned, each having its own little a porch and suite with bathroom facilities and what have you. And we did that after we saw that they were prepared to spend $7 billion on sandals. We got no reply, but the community continues to persist to do what it can to enhance its facilities and to upgrade what is possible, doing it piece by piece, and it's growing. And maybe they will appreciate, the residents of Blanchisseuse would appreciate it far more than what the than in a scenario where it was just given to them.
Why do you think there's been a lack of response? Is it that it's not seen as viable? Is it that it's not seen as an industry or at least a community which could offer a tourist product? From the standpoint of the fact that, yes, you're pushing this, yes, the Community Council, whom we have spoken to on this program, have been greatly appreciative of all the efforts involved, and have seen the development of Blanchisseuse since its establishment in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. But from the bigger fish, there seems to be a lack of response, participation. Why is that the case?
When you mean from the government, are you speaking?
Yes.
Well, I can't speak for the government, and I don't know the government's challenges. But I certainly believe that a government should give consideration to a community that has all the attributes to be a tourist destination. It's 13 beaches. You have the Marian River, which offers all kinds of opportunities for kayaking and that kind of thing, picnicking and what have you. We have some landmark things to see in the community. For example, at the Mount Carmel Church there are 2 bells. One was minted in 1834, if I recall, and the other one was minted in 1838. Those are significant years in the context of the abolition of slavery. One was minted in Lyons, in France, and the other was minted somewhere in the United Kingdom. Now, that tells me that the possibilities for other things, for example, we also have a most exotic hiking trail. People come from all over Trinidad to do that hiking trail. And it's a jump-off point also if you want to access the inaccessible beaches, and there are many on that coast. You can do it from Blanchisseuse by merely boarding a pirogue or a boat and things like that. Mm-hmm. Once the rooms are built and we have capacity, the community will begin to develop. Mm-hmm. Along come the Blanchisseuse Dance Company, and then along will come the Blanchisseuse Drama Company, which would seek to provide entertainment on an ongoing basis. You never know, we might produce a Hamilton from a Blanchisseuse. In addition, when one considers with a capacity of, let's say, 100 people in the village for a week, we need to give them the kind of experience of the Blanchisseuse cuisine. And so the restaurants will come, and the community is certain that it does not want, as it were, any of the fast food outlets. So that the expectation is that we would have exotic, specialist kind of restaurants, each catering to a different taste. And so that by the time you leave the community after a 1-week stay, you would have had a very good experience about the different kinds of cuisine that are available at Blanchisseuse.
Mm-hmm. Now let's speak about the Jazz and Heritage Festival this year. I mean, we've interviewed many artists, we've heard from them and their excitement. What makes North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival 2023 different to the ones that we've experienced previously?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be different. It's going to be unique. It is the feel-good experience that participants patrons get when they come to North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. We must not, as it were, at any time underplay the heritage component of it, because that covers the cuisine and the craft and what have you. Further, and that is all of the North Coast, and that is of Blanchisseuse. The other point is this, that Blanchisseuse is a place where families gather. It's a place where friends gather. So you might want to say that it's a gathering of friends and family, all of which adds, each component adds to the feel-good experience. Let me say to you, when people come to Blanchisseuse North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival, they come and they see a festival that is properly organized. You don't have the confusion associated with parking and things like that. When you come, you go to either parking zone A or you go to parking zone B. Each parking lot is secured parking. But more than that, you are shuttled from the parking to the festival park, which is a stone's throw away, so that you don't, as it were, get difficulties and so on and so forth. If you come with your big coolers and what have you, you can go and put the coolers at the door, and you go and park, and you're shuttled back to your cooler. That's the nature of the organization. Further than that, we have the parking and that all that arrangement and travel and transport are in fact very crucial. You can use the park and ride if you don't want to come driving to Blanchished. And you can go to the paddock at the Queen's Park, Savannah and Parks securely and safely and board the bus, but you must have the ticket, which is sold at the very ticket outlets where you purchase your admission ticket for the Jazz Festival. It's $100, return. So you get on the bus and you come up, and after the show, you get on the bus and you come right back down to the paddock. This year, the Public Transport Service Corporation, and I really must commend the new Chief Executive Officer at the PTSC, Mr. Patrick Gomez. He is quite an interesting person because he saw the need for this thing, and he, as it were, put on services coming directly from the following areas. And I do it slowly. Point Fortin, San Fernando, Sandy Grande, Arima. Services will be coming directly from these districts. And patrons have to, as it were, engage directly with the Public Transport Service Corporation for these services. And you go to ptsc.co.tt. May I repeat that? Those of you who want to engage in the services coming directly from Point Fortin, San Fernando, Sandy Grande, Arima, you can go to ptsc.co.tt and follow the prompts, and you can make your purchases for your tickets, which I suggest you do in advance and early, because there is a demand for these seats on board these buses.
Let me ask you, Mr. Leasing. Born here, played here. Precisely the meaning of that tagline. Precise to the point, but speak to me about I suppose, what is behind the creation of that tagline and what it means. It is just, as we see it, it just means born here, played here, or is there a deeper meaning to it?
There is. Trinidad, in terms of its music, has been known for its calypso and soca. And over the many years that I have been associated with Mass and Carnival, there is a season for our music. There has been a season for our music. And so it still happens. We produce music for Carnival, and that music then lives with the artists throughout the year, because following our Carnival, they begin the Carnival circuit, moving from one Carnival destination to another. All these destination carnivals are in fact children of the Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, and I believe that is why the NCC this year felt it would talk about its carnival as being the mother of all carnivals. I mean, I could tell you for a fact that Trinidad Carnival has spawned the carnivals in Miami, Florida, in Labor Day in Brooklyn, Notting Hill Carnival, Toronto Carnival, and Jamaica Carnival, which I had a personal hand in. And so, in addition to that, there are carnivals throughout the Caribbean today. Grenada has its carnival. Barbados has always been different. They didn't want to call it carnival, so they called it crop over. But it's carnival. And we built it with our entertainers and musicians and mass creators over the years, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But save and except to say that after Carnival, our musicians disappear for the whole year and come back towards the end of the year and begin to create and work again for the new season of Carnival, which over the years started earlier and earlier. The band launches used to be in the early days in the month of November and December. Band launches are beginning now in the month of July, August, September, October, because the people who are now involved in bands are certainly much more entrepreneur-driven and understand the importance of getting into the track early and displaying their wares earlier. So that we felt in the context of North Coast Jazz, our music is not just about the soca artists and the calypsonians. It's much more than that. And we know for a fact that at any time during the day, on any day, in any week, in any month in this country, hundreds of musicians are honing the craft, whether they be script writers, whether they be people playing the pipes, people playing the pan, people playing the piano. We have hundreds of musicians every day rehearsing, and many of them hoping for an opportunity to alight a stage. We have therefore created a stage specifically to cater to these musicians who, until North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival, were really treated scantily. But with North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival came a stage that became Trinidad's in a serious and more meaningful way. That's why we say to you, born here, played here. But it does not stop with the music. We do a movie night on the Friday night preceding the Jazz Day. And for years, and since we've started each year, we have played a movie. We have exhibited a movie that was created by a Trinidadian producer. This year, we feature Hero, which has been done by Francis Solomon. And that movie is the story of a real hero, Justice Ulrich Ross, who the story really is about his life and the fact that he was an RAF pilot who had a record during the Second World War. But after the war, he became very political. He was advisor to the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, that famous Africanist, if you want to call it, a person who saw a United States of Africa long before Gaddafi thought he would do it. And so, but make no bones about it, that is something, Keaton, that one day you must talk about. How the powers that be ensure that there was no united Africa. And so Justice Cross worked in other places in Africa, but he returned home to Trinidad to become a judge in the High Court and did human service here for us. He was and is indeed a hero for Trinidad and Tobago.
Is it that North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival
That's the Friday night, 7 p.m. Bring your blanket, bring your chairs. There'll be refreshments, courtesy sponsors. But bring your children, bring the family, so that they can see a good movie about a good person, we don't have heroes in Trinidad. We only have villains.
Listen, before we get into that conversation, before we do, is it that North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival is to become a staple on the tourism calendar in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, let me say to you, one of the key sponsors to this year's festival is the Ministry of Tourism and Tourism Trinidad. And if we didn't get help from them, I thought this year we might have had to call off the festival, given the cost associated with doing a festival at the North Coast. And I think people need to understand that and know that if we could have done this festival and not charge at all, we would have done it. But we can't, because there are costs to be met, and these costs can only be met by the gates. As the people who have been promoting this event, the LJMJ team, we long for the day when we can walk away from the festival with a little change. We haven't been able to do that. And so we are grateful for Tourism Trinidad and the Tourism Ministry for coming on board and helping us to build a destination. I think this is what community development is all about, building a community and in the process, building a tourist destination.
Mm-hmm. And as we conclude, Mr. Leasing, are there any, speak to us about, you're just one member of this committee, speak to us about the rest of the committee and by extension, those who are integral to the establishment and continuance of North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival.
When I first thought about doing this project, I leaned towards an old friend of mine, John Gill, with whom I have collaborated over many a year in doing different kinds and different levels of promotion. And John was very excited about the prospects, and we just, between his mind and my mind, we did it. When you come to the festival and you see that enclosed area of tents and stage and drama and what have you, that is what John Gill creates. I'll tell you, he creates the magical atmosphere that we have. That's John Gill. Then we have our secretary to the board, Ms. Margaret Gittins. Ms. Margaret Gittins is a special person. She is very sensitive, and if you speak to her too hard, she becomes very emotional and she remains annoyed with you for a long time. But she is a darling, but more than that, without Margaret, particularly in this year, we would have no festival. And I mean it. Margaret has gone out there like perhaps John Craig, when he never used to beg. And literally, block by block, built it up, moving from one little sponsor to another. She has been able to help us pay a lot of the bills this year. And so I really want to publicly thank Margaret for her ongoing contributions to the development of North Coast Jazz. Of course, we have my son, Darren, who is as excited about Blanchisseuse and he calls it his community. And he has an extremely person-on-person relationship with much of the people. I know for a while he served on the school board of the Blanchisseuse Secondary School, but I hear the current politicians have thrown him off the board, which is amusing because it was a lot of work for him, working with his former colleagues at school. I think the principal, Mr. Johnson, used to go to QRC with Darren. And so Darren was very excited to work with them. But he sees Blanchisseuse as much a community of his as I see it myself. So that if you ask us which is really our home, where is our home, we'll tell you Blanchisseuse. And of course we have Jerome Lewis, who is our creative person, who works with us very quietly, trying to create the things that we talk and envisage in terms of technology. But what is key to the North Coast Jazz this year, as indeed it was last year, we have been trying to create a cashless environment at Blanchisseuse, whereby when you come to Blanchisseuse, you can use your phone and your phone wallet and pay for all the food you would want to buy, all the condiments you would want to buy, all the nice things that you want to buy and take home. Or conversely, if you would want to support the bar. And we've been working with the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, to create, as it were, an enhanced technology environment, whereby we were hoping this year to introduce our wristbands. So when you bought a ticket, you would have been given a wristband. And when you go to the door, you merely scan the wristband and you walk to the door. We've had difficulties with that, largely because the technology providers in this country really think very little about Blanchisseuse. And so the technology in Blanchisseuse remains the pits. Digicel and Bmobile provide little or no services to the people of Blanchisseuse. I didn't want to get into that, but it impacts the North Coast Jazz in more ways than one. And I long to the day when I could come public and say to the whole country and to the world that there is a technology provider in Trinidad who is worth their salt. I say this morning, in the context of blanchissaires, and we have had our own problems on Gattaca Street and Woodbrook with all of them. But in the context of blanchissaires, they treat blanchissaires as if it does not exist. And that is most unfortunate.
Well, Mr. Lee Singh, what is most unfortunate is that we're out of time. In fact, we've gone a bit overboard. However...
No, but before you go, I want to make one appeal to my good friend Rohan Sinanan. Please, fix the remainder of the road so that people can at least enjoy the drive. Please, Minister Sinanan, do us justice this morning.
Mr. Lee Singh, thank you very much for your time. You can't help it, can you? But that's fine. It's because you're a patriot and these things truly bother you. But the work that yourself and the rest of the committee are doing, Margaret Gittins, John Gill, Jerome Lewis, and by extension yourself, congratulations. And I look forward.
You didn't call Darren Lee Singh. Very important to our team.
And Darren Lee Singh, well, we look forward to seeing you guys next weekend. And thank you very much for the invitation. So I'll be there. I'll be enjoying the festivities and certainly look forward to it. But for now, all the very best and see you next week.
And I promise you that I would take you to Burke's Jerk and give you a good plate.
That sounds like a plan.
Burke's Jerk is going to be in Lancashire this year.
That sounds like a plan. Oh my goodness. You know, I was hungry before the interview. If not, I'm hungry now. Anyway, Mr.
When you see the cut, where you're getting your cuts from that pink pig, boy, you would want to eat that jerk pork. I say no more.
Have a good one, Mr. Lee Singh. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day, people. See you at Blanchissaires, Sir Solomon Hochoy Park, Saturday, the 27th. But please come for movie night, Hero, Friday, the 26th.
Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, WESN's AM Prime now breaks for news over the hour. We'll be right back after this.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Opposition leader vindicated by Privy Council ruling. Armed man runs through Providence school yard. Farmers call on government for assistance. Regionally, Jamaica's opposition objects to politicians receiving massive salary increases. And internationally, 6 more bodies recovered after Hippo capsized boat in Malawi. Now for the details. Opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bissessa says the judgment delivered by the Privy Council in the case brought by Ravi Balgobin Maraj, who challenged the postponement of local government elections, is a landmark legal decision which has significant political effects. She says this latest judgment is a vindication of the right of the people to choose their representatives and also to choose to vote them out if they offer themselves for re-election. She now wants to know whether the salaries paid to councillors and aldermen after the March cutoff date was lawful. Would they have to pay it back? What about the many decisions made by these corporations after that date? Are they legal? Will the government now have to come back to the Parliament to validate all of this? And who is to be made accountable? Providence Girls' School teachers and students were evacuated on Thursday morning after an armed man ran through the schoolyard. Reports say that a man with a firearm was seen running through the schoolyard. The TTPS was contacted by the principal after the girls were heard screaming. To the Ministry of Agriculture for farmers to get a rebate.
We are asking, and we had said this before to the minister and his committee at meetings, at the meeting of the advisory committee, we are begging them that assist the farmers with a rebate. It was done in the past to assist us in the height of the dry season in 2011.
In regional developments now, Jamaica's politicians, including those in the local government, will receive major salary increases over a 3-year period, according to Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark. The announcement was made on Tuesday in the House of Representatives. However, the opposition People's National Party disagrees with the massive salary increases. It expressed in a statement that the increase came before the government had satisfactorily addressed the discontent of many teachers, nurses, police officers, and other civil servants caused by the public sector compensation restructuring exercise. In international news now, rescuers have recovered 6 more bodies from a river in southern Malawi, days after a boat carrying about 37 people was capsized by a hippo on Monday. The bodies were recovered Wednesday from the Shire River in Malawi's Shanze district, bringing the death toll to 7. 13 people were earlier unaccounted for. And on Monday, the body of a 1-year-old toddler was pulled out of the river, which was infested with crocodiles and hippos. Those found dead were aged between 17 and 51. Well, that was your News City Hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
The MG showroom has an SUV for your personality with multiple features that will have you driving in comfort and style. MG gives you the most miles, and now you can own your brand new MG for as little as $85 a day. I am Trisha Burke from Massey Motors. Contact me to drive away with your MG today.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival begins on Friday, May 26th with Movie Night. 7 p.m. Festival Grounds, Blanchisseuse. This year features the local hit movie, Hero, directed by Francis Solomon. Come see the story of local justice, Ulrich Cross. Join us at North Coast Jazz Family Night. May 26th, 7 p.m. Bring your cooler, bring your blanket, bring your family. North Coast Jazz. Born here, played here. North Coast Jazz is sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, Visit Trinidad, and the National Lotteries Control Board.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this: screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The best toy tickets are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do in Andre.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to AM Prime. Thank you very much. Now, as you know, yesterday the Privy Council ruled against the government's decision to extend local government elections and the life of councillors and aldermen by 1 year. This was a decision 3-2 to the Privy Council ruling against the government. I'm now joined by Opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshmi to discuss the Privy Council's ruling. She's with us via telephone call this morning. Good morning, Opposition Senator.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Thank you for joining me. On what grounds was the Privy Council, the three lords of the Privy Council versus the two, were they unable to agree with the decision of the Trinidad and Tobago's Court of Appeal?
Well, basically, there were two limbs to this argument, and the limb that they agreed with is that by way of what we call the retrospective application of proclaimed legislation, what the government essentially did is delay an election and make a new provision in the law, an amended provision, applicable to persons elected in 2019. And we argue that that is what we call retrospective application, which ought not to be done. There's some excellent learning in this judgment about, I thought it was particularly instructive that the Privy Council said that the right to vote out is as important as the right to vote in, and that they could not glean from the amended words that the intention of Parliament, because at the end of the day, remember, it's not the government alone that makes the law, it's the Parliament. So all of the parliamentarians who voted in support of this amended provision whereby the term of office was changed from 3 to 4 years, they could not gather from the wording of the legislation and any of the evidence before them that the intention of Parliament was to make that provision applicable to the existing councillors and aldermen elected in 2019. And they said in the absence of clear and express provisions to that effect, it would not be for the Parliament or even the government to tinker with, the term of office of elected representatives. Mm-hmm. And that's the simplest that I could put it, basically.
So basically, the three lords of the Privy Council took issue with the fact that government, by extension Parliament, actually having the power to decide the life of local government representatives.
Well, exactly, and that's what they did. You see, 1 month before the election was due, they took a decision to proclaim this one section, and that one section dealt with the term of office, which, and I would say as someone who voted on this bill and who contributed to the debate on this bill, it was never in our contemplation, at least as the opposition, that extended period of time was applicable to the existing representatives. It was always in our mind understood that when another election took place and all of the reforms were put in, that the elected representatives would serve for a period of 4 years. I would say this too, that we also had in front of us when we were debating this bill a series of changes to the structure of local government. So the persons who are elected at the next election would not be functioning in the same way as the persons who were elected in 2019. And that, in our view, is a fundamental part of the argument, because you cannot say that suddenly, it's almost like today you're a television host, and tomorrow I say, well, I've proclaimed a law which means that you're no longer a television host, you are now, the tea lady at WSN. And we've proclaimed the law mid your term, and we've extended for another year, but you're the tea lady for the last year of your term, when you thought your term as a TV producer was going to end in next month. Like that's how ridiculous it is. The entire role, function, duties, and responsibilities of local government representatives will be changed when this law is fully proclaimed and implemented. So how could you then say, well, I'm just giving you the extra year now when, you have a different role? They haven't proclaimed the other parts of the law that deal with the different rules. So, listen, this was nothing more, in our view, than an attempt by the government to avoid facing the electorate. And it was a real, what I would call a legislative sleight of hand, that, one of the things that the Court of Appeal, one of the judges in the Court of Appeal raised with us is that, look, it's open to parliamentarians to ask that specific clauses be put in dealing with the time of proclamation and so on when you're dealing with legislative matters. And that may be something that the opposition going forward would have to take into account, because never before have we seen a government try to come through the back door and delay elections. I want to point out something which is also very critical in this case. In the past, we had delays to local government elections under the when Prime Minister Manning was in office. And he came, at least, I'm not saying it was right, but he at least came to the Parliament with an express amendment to the Local Municipal Corporations Act to say local government elections will not be held when it is due, it is deferred to this day. And he passed it. Yes, he used his parliamentary majority to pass it, but at least he was open, clear, and forthright with the fact that he was bringing legislation to defer the election because, well, at the time they were also discussing reform, etc., etc., etc. And that was his justification for the deferral. So this, to me, was dishonest on the part of the government. It was a way for them to really defer the election without saying we want to defer the election. But they relied on statutory, it was their version of statutory interpretation to avoid facing the electorate at a time when, as I pointed out, if you go back in the archives, you would see that the time when this election would have been due and counters and all of them would have been demitting office, it would have been the time when, you know, we were approaching that 600 murder mark, the entire country was in an uproar, and so many things were going on. And it's clear that, you know, they did not want to face the electorate at that time. I think they still don't.
So let me ask
they
you,
were
you
hoping
keep
to buy time to put things in order.
You keep saying, in our view, just for clarification, are you referring to the legal team, are you referring to the opposition, or is it that both share the same view?
Well, I wear both hats in this case. As you know, our litigant in this matter, Mr. Ravi Balgobin-Maraj, you know, has been a true, I would call him a crusader in terms of taking the government to task. But it is really, you know, under the leadership of Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, we of course have the support of many people, including Mr. Ravi Balgobin-Maraj as a litigant, a public interest litigant, to take on these matters. But the opposition, working myself, Mr. Ram Logan and others, and Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, you know, really took to studying the intricacies of this case. I think people aren't aware of how much research and thought and strategizing and analysis goes into the process of bringing a claim before the court to challenge a public law decision. It is a lot of work. So the opposition worked very closely with, and I think that's why Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar always refers to, well, myself, Mr. Ram Logan, and others, our legal team, our lawyers.
Let me ask you,
they do basically fulfill the roles to some extent as a you know, a supporting entity. And this particularly because it dealt with legislation, the UNC, our MPs, our local government practitioners were also very critical and offered a tremendous amount of support in trying to hold on to for salvation, which we did not win on, which is that the constitutional, we have a specific constitutional right in Trinidad that is unlike any other Commonwealth constitution. Again, most people know this, but that was actually a negotiated specific right that was placed into our constitution by the then opposition asking for it, Mr. Castledale and others, wanting the specific right of freedom of political expression. So everyone has a freedom of expression, and we have freedom of expression, but we also have a separate specific right of freedom of political expression. And we try to argue that by deferring elections, you were taking away people's right to freedom of political expression, because the ultimate manner in which the ultimate way that you express your political view is through voting. You understand? But we were not successful on that ground simply because local government elections are not part of our constitution. And the opposition has raised in the past when we're discussing local government reform that we think it is important to consider putting local government in the constitution, because local government is becoming more and more important.
What are your thoughts on the Attorney General Reginald Moore suggesting that the Privy Council had no issue of interpretation with regards to the breach of constitution or of any common right to vote by the extension of the date for calling local government elections?
Well, I wouldn't say told me that they had no issue with it. They didn't say see it as a constitutional breach. Now, I don't think people understand the difference between constitutional and legal. If you break the law, you do something that's illegal. If you place an interpretation in the law that is wrong, then it's illegal. If you breach the Constitution and a provision of the Constitution, it's unconstitutional. So there was no breach of a provision of the Constitution. But what the government did is they interpreted the Municipal Corporations Act in a way that could not be upheld, and that's why they lost. So it's not that there was nothing illegal. It was an illegal interpretation. It was an interpretation that was give retrospective effect, and it wasn't permissible. So I looked at a press conference yesterday, and I saw that as a very, I felt sorry to some extent. I thought it was pathetic. I thought it was a real last-ditch effort to save a little bit of face. What I found atrocious was the comments about warning the media about reporting on the matter and that they could possibly find themselves in contempt. That is really desperation at its highest. When you think the PLM cannot stoop any lower, they surprise you, because what they are really trying to do is take control of the narrative in this matter and stifle public debate. And again, they are showing their frank and open commitment to just taking away our democracy and our rights. If it's not freedom of the press, it's freedom of expression or whatever other freedom. You imposed. That's what the Privy Council basically said. You imposed. The government imposed the representation on people that they did not vote for. And then you are turning around now to say, well, be very careful how you report this matter. You will find yourself in contempt. I mean, that's ridiculous.
The AG pointed out the fact that it was 3 lords of the Privy Council versus 2, and the ruling still of the appeal court in Trinidad is relevant. Are there any concerns of the fact that it was 3 versus 2? It was a slim, in other words, just one individual who would have made the entire difference in this vote.
So, I don't know, you're probably familiar with the judgment of Surat and Barry Francis that the government likes to talk about all the time. That was, Barry Francis, coming out of our Court of Appeal, was also a 3-2 decision. And the 2 judges who dissented in that case was our Chief Justice and one of the most distinguished judges in the region right now, Justice Peter Jamada. It matters not. The law is, and this is the doctrine that we followed from time immemorial, is that the majority decision is what binds. And the Privy Council binds the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal are now bound to follow the decision of the Privy Council. So you can't add 3 from the Court of Appeal with your 2 from the Privy Council and try to manufacture something that looks like a win to save face. It doesn't work that way. The judgment of the Court of Appeal was overturned by the Privy Council, full stop. That's the end of it. That's the decision, and this is what binds the government and the entire country right now.
If it is up to the government now, or by extension the Prime Minister, to call a date for local government elections, even following this ruling, does the Prime Minister still have the power to call local government elections in December of this year?
No. Quite frankly, I don't think so, unless they come up with some other creative legislative sleight of hand or turn, or they come back to the Parliament and basically come and say, look, we need to put this off again and defer it in the way Mr. Manning did. And if that is the case and that is what they choose to do, well, they will answer to the Parliament and they will answer to the population. You cannot continuously find creative loophole ways, which is what they did in this case, to avoid facing the electorate. If you're not ready and you know that you are in a position where you cannot face the population, you cannot face the electorate for whatever reason, well, come out and say so and say, listen, I'm bringing a specific provision to defer election. And you will pay the political price, and you will answer for your political decisions, because that's what it is. It's a political decision. And what they try to do in this case is mask a political decision with by sanitizing it as though it was a statutory interpretation issue. But it was a political decision. So if you have a political decision to make, come out and play man and say that it's a political decision that you have to make.
But the decision does not give a set timeline for when elections should be called. That's one of the concerns, because the opposition leader called for elections to be called now, but...
Right. What the decision says is that the amendment did not apply, which means that elections, councillors and aldermen were supposed to demit office on the 3rd of September, and once they demit office, the way the provision is read, if you read the entire provision, there is a time frame in which the election ought to be called. That is about 3 months. It's 3 months from the day that they demit office. So we are well outside the time in which the election ought to be called. The election is due, and if they fail to do it without some sort of statutory legislative approval from the Parliament, well, I'm sorry, but I guess I'll just have some more work to do.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I think there is a lot to work to be done, because I don't think any political party at this point in time is prepared for local government elections. We have to bear that in mind.
Oh, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true at all.
A call for representatives from all ends of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
As far as
Well, we reopened our nominations, but I want to point out something. The UNC, and again, this speaks to the mindset of the people who were debating this law and how we interpreted the law. We last year opened our nominations. We had our nominations open. We closed nominations. We had all persons interested last year filing nominations. We have reopened, given the lapse of time, because some persons have now expressed an interest in stepping forward and serving. So we have reopened for a very short period, for 1 week. But it shows you that we never thought that this amendment could be applied to the existing councils and aldermen. So we were, since last year, had our ball rolling in terms of receiving our nominations, and we were ready to start screening when the government dropped this bombshell that their very creative way of avoiding the electorate come December. So I don't think it's fair to say that nobody is ready. We have started the ball rolling, but of course, they derailed the entire process, and we now have to get back on track, and it is for them to get the country back on track. They cannot continue to just rule by way of, you know, autocracy, and that's what they're doing.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your time this morning and for sharing that information with us. And well, we look forward to the response on the part of the Prime Minister, because I know the Attorney General has responded. Let's hear what date local government elections are set for, unless, as you mentioned, some special legislation is now brought to the Parliament. But for now, thank you very much and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshmi joining us on AM Prime this morning. That's all the time we have, actually, so that's where we'll have to conclude it. But thank you very much. You can look forward to more discussions on local government elections and the ruling by the Privy Council coming up on Talking Point. That's in about 30 minutes' time. But for now, that's where I'll end it. I'm Keaton Shaw. Have a great weekend ahead. Be safe, keep well, and as I've always said, always be the mature, rational individual. Be disciplined, be responsible. We can make trying a bit sweeter. But I'll see you again bright and early from 6 a.m. on Monday morning for AM Prime. Until then, bye-bye.
WESN.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival.
Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah, hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy Shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here. Tickets available at Crosby's, Extra Foods Endeavour, Shogunas Main Road, Sangre Grande, Arima, Grand Bazaar, Mart's Liquor Mart, Diego Martin, Kenny's Sports Outlets, Athletes by the Park, and WESN.
North Coast Jazz is sponsored by the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, Visit Trinidad, and the National Lotteries Control Board.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish. I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
The MG showroom has an SUV for your personality with multiple features that will have you driving in comfort and style. MG gives you the most miles, and now you can own your brand new MG for as little as $85 a day. I am Trisha Burke from Massey Motors. Contact me to drive away with your MG today.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
I am Sule A. Joseph, and we are WESN, Content Capital.
Against Qatar, and they made a series of blunders. Now they are moving away from a confrontational attitude toward an extreme conciliatory attitude, forgetting about everything that happened in the past 10 years. And many argue that they are going too far, and they are trying to bring Syria back into the Sunni Arab fold, and this is a delusion because history of the past 30 years show that Syria has never been willing to cut its relations with Iran.
Professor, thank you very much for your time. Karim Emil Bitar. Leaders of the world's 7 richest nations are in Hiroshima, Japan for the G7 summit. The group includes the U.S., U.K., Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. 8 other nations have also been invited this year. Earlier, the group agreed to new sanctions against Russia, saying that it would starve the country of G7 technology, industrial equipment, and services that support its war machine. Along with the war in Ukraine, other issues like North Korea's weapons testing and provocative moves by China are also on the agenda. Catherine Viette reports.
This year's group photo held in a solemn location.
Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park, as the G7 summit gets underway. A reminder of the horrors of nuclear weapons and one of the topics up for discussion. But the main objectives of the meeting to present a unified front against Russia and China. The US, UK, and other EU leaders are pressing for further restrictions on Moscow to undermine its ability to wage war on Ukraine.
We are now focused on shutting the door on loopholes and continuing to cut Russia off from critical supplies. We will restrict trade in Russian diamonds. Russian diamonds are not forever, and we will lay out openly and frankly why these sanctions are necessary and justified.
The China question, too, looms large as the G7 leaders grapple with growing military threats and economic coercion from Beijing. While China is an important trade partner, the summit will seek to diversify supply chains and reduce its reliance on the Asian nation.
Given its role in the international community and the size of its economy, China has a special responsibility in the world. It has to play by international rules, and we call on China to press Russia to stop its military aggression.
With concerns about the use of nuclear weapons at the forefront again, the Japanese Prime Minister is pressing hard to address the issue of denuclearization. Fumio Kishida wants the other leaders to back his plan that focuses on transparency around existing stockpiles and a commitment to non-proliferation.
And at the same time as the G7, an alternative summit taking place in northwest China. Beijing wants to enhance its strategy with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, from building infrastructure to boosting trade, taking on a new leadership role in a region that has traditionally been a Russian sphere of influence. For more, let's speak to our correspondent, Yenna Lee, standing by in Beijing. Hello to you, Yenna. Is China playing in Russia's backyard, so to speak?
Well, these Central Asian countries are post-Soviet states, so Moscow is hardly going to be thrilled about the prospect of this open rapprochement between Central Asia and China. Russia is busy with the war it decided to wage on Ukraine, and it's left a void in the east that China is and has been filling. But that said, Moscow and Beijing still have a very good relationship, and this growing friendship between China and Central Asian states is nothing particularly new. In fact, China has been investing in this region for years now with its Belt and Road Initiative, also known as the New Silk Road. Back in 2013, President Xi Jinping actually launched this $1 trillion infrastructure project in Kazakhstan. So President Xi's pet project, this Belt and Road Initiative, is a central part of the Xi'an summit that took place on Thursday and Friday in China. In his keynote speech on Friday, President Xi tried to draw parallels from the historic Silk Road to the modern-day economic potential in the region. He called for an increase in cross-border infrastructure projects and the completion of a gas pipeline. He also mentioned security and stability in Central Asia. Not only would unrest be bad for business, but Beijing also fears that unrest could spill over into its northwestern province of Xinjiang.
Yeah, so economy, security, high on the agenda. How important is this Central Asian region to China?
It's clearly a priority for Beijing. 4 out of the 5 countries that were present in Xi'an are actually members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a political, economic, security bloc led by China and Russia that some call an anti-NATO bloc. Tellingly, President Xi Jinping's first overseas trip after the pandemic was to Kazakhstan and to Uzbekistan. It explains why Beijing is calling this Xi'an event both a landmark summit and its first major diplomatic activity this year. Judging by how busy Chinese diplomats have been since China's reopening, calling this one the most important one so far this year is really rather quite remarkable. The organizers of the event rolled out meters and meters, potentially kilometers of red carpet for the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, they had this grandiose Tang Dynasty-themed opening ceremony, and Chinese state media has been providing around-the-clock coverage of this as well. And one of the big announcements that came out this Friday was that this summit is to be the first of many. Leaders have decided that they want this to take place every 2 years, so the next one is scheduled for 2025 in Kazakhstan.
All right, Yenna, thank you very much. Yenna Lee reporting from Beijing. After 7 years being held captive by militants in West Africa, an 88-year-old Australian doctor has been released. Originally from Perth, Dr. Kenneth Elliott and his wife ran a clinic in Burkina Faso. He's said to be safe and reunited with his family.
It's a relief for the family of Kenneth Elliott. The 88-year-old Australian doctor has been freed and is back in his home country 7 years after being kidnapped by Islamic militants in Burkina Faso. Australia's Foreign Minister was delighted with the news.
I am so pleased that his release has been secured and he is safely again with his family. The Australian government has been working tirelessly over that time to secure his release, and I want to publicly thank all of the government officials who have worked to ensure Dr. Elliott's release.
In 2016, Kenneth and his wife Jocelyn Elliott had been running a medical clinic for more than 40 years in the town of Djibo, near the borders of Mali and Niger. They were known for providing free care to the region's inhabitants. But the couple was kidnapped by a group linked to Al-Qaeda on the 15th of January 2016, the same day that 30 people were killed in an extremist attack in Burkina Faso's capital. Jocelyn Elliott was freed 3 weeks later.
I want to be with my husband so that we can return to Djibo and continue to work there.
Australia's foreign minister said no ransom was paid to secure Elliott's freedom. Upon her release, Sophie Petronan, a French citizen who was also held hostage, said that she spent 2 months with the Australian surgeon whilst being held captive.
A final day of rallies before Greece holds what may be its most uncertain general election in a decade. Outgoing Conservative Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has been touting his economic track record, while leftist challenger Alexis Tsipras accuses his incumbent government of handing out billions to political allies, while Greeks are struggling with high inflation. In the U.S. state of Nebraska, lawmakers are expected to have just enough votes to pass a bill this Friday that combines a ban on gender-affirming care for minors with a 12-week abortion ban. The hybrid measure was advanced Tuesday by just a single vote. That's left the Capitol in a volatile mood. Lawmakers
Ford can still whip up a crowd. The legendary actor was greeted by a sea of fans at the film festival before the premiere of what's